Today I'm ranking every battle in the Star Wars movies from the worst to the best because that's something that every sane person has asked themselves before. I'll also go over what I think the 3 best battles from the Clone Wars are because trust me, there are a lot of good ones. I'm looking at you, Space Vietnam. Sorry, Umbara.
I was about to say that.
At 15 is the Battle of Exegol. So this battle is very big, but not necessarily in a good way. Not only is there a fleet of 1080 Zeiston class Star Destroyers, which are basically just larger Imperial Star Destroyers, which already is an odd concept because it gets rid of all the impact of the Star Destroyers being these Goliaths hulking over all other Star craft, but with this, there's so many of them that they don't even have the same impact. But also the Citizens fleet is cool, but again, more is sometimes less because it just becomes kind of chaotic and there's not very much in terms of character work here, but it's mainly just cameos and fan service without much substance. Also, the combat is nothing that we haven't already seen before, but done better in the past. At 14 is the Battle of Eadu. The Battle of Eadu from Rogue One is already a huge step up from that of Exegol because it's not just fundamentally trash, but this battle is also extremely short and takes place on a planet where you can barely see anything, except some mountains and rain. However, seeing galactic Civil War combat in a modern style is really cool in my opinion, so that boosts this up from last. Next up at 13 is the Battle of Starkiller Base. The Battle of Starkiller Base is one that doesn't have enough importance in the story to grant it a high selection, but Han Solo's death and the duel between Kylo Ren and Finn both take higher priority over the battle, so it's hard to really like it that much. Also, the scene itself is more or less a knockoff of the trench run from A New Hope, which we'll go over later, just like the rest of The Force Awakens, but also like the rest of The Force Awakens, it feels bland and unimaginative in comparison to the original movie. I would still consider it a well done scene regardless that there are some good parts of. 12. Battle of D'Qar. This battle was a fun way to start off The Last Jedi on an action-packed note, and it was very fun to see a modern space battle. Also, it's somehow the only one in this whole trilogy, and I liked Poe Dameron's moments as well as the drama of the final bit, with the bombers collapsing in on the First Order dreadnought while the Kennedy guy is yelling at the top of his lungs and stuff. That was a pretty good scene. 11. Battle of Mimban. Solo isn't a movie known for its battles because it doesn't really have any, but I really wanted to include this one to glaze it because the idea of seeing stormtroopers on the front lines in a more gritty and war movie-like way is one of the coolest, most underutilized concepts in Star Wars, in my opinion. Even if they aren't technically stormtroopers but are rather mud troopers, kind of like a military version of stormtroopers, the color scheme here has a very dark, realistic approach, which is a nice touch, and seeing the confusion amongst the different ranks was great as well. So not too much going on here, but I do really like the kind of style they were going for. So to take a quick break from the main movies, I'm going to look over what I would consider to be the 3 best battles from the Clone Wars. At third is the Siege of Mandalore, which showed intense fighting between Mandalorian super commandos and clone troopers, which had so many memorable parts, from the fighting in the tunnels to the descent on the planet. And at second, I'll go with the Battle of Umbara, which was arguably the most unique battle in the show, had an entirely new planet and environment comparable to the prequels. And at first, I'll say the second Battle of Geonosis, specifically landing at Point Rain, which was incredible from start to end, and if Umbara is Space Vietnam, then this battle is much closer to that of Space D-Day. Going back to the movies though, at 10 is the Battle of Crait. This is my favorite sequels battle for a reason. The red spray of dust, which is emitted up whenever laser blasts riddle the surface of the planet, is both beautiful and symbolizes the death of the Resistance as it bleeds out from the First Order attack. While there are noticeable similarities to the Battle of Hoth with the walkers and also the weaker type fighters, it's much more subtle here, and we also get to see a cool dogfight with the Millennium Falcon and TIE fighters through Crait's crystalline crust, which is another visually gorgeous scene. The best part is easily the end, where Finn almost dies in the name of the Resistance, but then Rose understands the importance of keeping their best leaders around to continue the fight. Next, at 9, is the Battle of Utapau. Now, for our first prequels battle, it truly pains me to put this one so low, because if the Utapau battle was like 20 minutes, it would probably be top 3 material. And I'm not saying it should be that long, but since it is only a minute or 2 long, it unfortunately, despite its great moments, doesn't have enough to get a higher placement. And by great moments, I am referring to the one clone jumping on a crab droid and rapid firing on it, also Grievous running over clones, and then of course the Utapauan warriors riding their dragon-like dactylians, which I think we could have seen more of. And I also saw a pretty cool comment under the video for this battle, which said, Revenge of the Sith had some of the best battle scenes in Star Wars, and they really are right. Even though Kashyyyk and Utapau and the Order 66 brief little Clone Wars snippets we see in there are, like I said, very brief and we don't see a lot of it, it is all extremely well done and makes me just want to see so much more from that war and that time period, that it really does stand out as some of the best well done battles in Star Wars. Unfortunately, with that movie, they were focusing more on the drama and the different characters than they were on the different battles of the Clone Wars, which is, the most logical thing to do for that story, but it still would have been really cool to see more of these in some form or another. At 8 is the Battle of Kashyyyk. In my opinion, this is the slightly better of the 2 brief Revenge of the Sith battles after Coruscant, because mainly the Wookiee army is just so dope, but then again, the action with the 41st Clone Legion is very cool too, and the beach battle is a very unique one in my opinion. We hadn't even really seen anything like this up to this point. That shot of the dwarf spider droid coming out of the water is still iconic till this day. And speaking of beach battles, at 7 is the Battle of Scarrif, which is the only time we've seen a galactic Civil War era space battle with modern effects, and the space battle is incredible. The battle on the beach is more realistic and gritty than what we've ever seen before, and once the Death Troopers arrive, it only gets better. Now, I'm not really going to include every main character dying as part of this battle because that stuff's kind of spread out, but then again, you kind of could include it. If we are including that, that just makes this way better because I find that to be an extremely dramatic and tragic end to a Star Wars movie. And after Revenge of the Sith, you could argue that Rogue One is the darkest Star Wars movie because every single main character dies. At 6 is the Battle of Geonosis. Some might get angry over how low I put this one, but then again, I'm talking about the battle specifically, and not the arena scene with all of the Jedi beforehand. My only problems with this scene come down to how short it is and how basic it is. The best thing about this battle was that this was the first time we get to see a land battle at this scale with 2 fully digital armies with multiple different vehicles and levels of fighting from aerial to the ground. But at the same time, it only has a few minutes of actual combat between the clones and battle droids, and it is really basic. I mean, most of the moments consist of clones just shooting at the droids in a horizontal line, and it takes place in a big desert with no notable landmarks or land features. These are arguably nitpicks though, as there are still some amazing shots like them fighting in the dust, and also the Jedi leading their troops like Kit Fisto and Aayla Secura, so overall, I do like it a lot, but I just couldn't really put it top 5 due to the fact of how basic and short it truly is. At 5 is the Battle of Endor. In my opinion, the original trilogy battles are generally the best, but Endor is the weakest of the 3. Some would say this is controversial, but then again, I never said that the battle in concept is the worst. I simply mean the execution of said battle. While Yavin and Hoth are both genius in their editing, despite how basic they really are, this scene is very complex, but arguably less impactful. It's still amazing though to see this many Star Destroyers, A-Wings, B-Wings, and other starfighters like TIE Interceptors and capital ships. The scene inside the second Death Star is very well done also, but some of the visuals don't hold up, and it is kind of too brief for all the content that really should be seen here. There's still good moments though, like the A-Wing pilot crashing into the Executor Superstar Destroyer, which then crashes into the second Death Star. And as far as the land battle goes, I don't know, it's never been my favorite, but arguably a little underrated because seeing some of the ways the Ewoks destroy the AT-STs is pretty entertaining, I must admit.
Oh, it's beautiful.
At 4 is the Battle of Naboo. The Battle of Naboo, I think, is pretty underrated, just like the movie it comes from, and the space battle was enthralling, better visuals than we'd ever seen up to this point for a space sequence in Star Wars. The Gungan battle actually presents the battle droids like threatening enemies rather than jokes, and the battle within the city has some very cool moments like the climb up the windows. At 3 is the Battle of Hoth, and I think this battle deserves all of the credit it usually receives. Not only is Hoth such a great way to start the sequel to the original Star Wars with a new alien world that is very quick-paced and ends with an epic battle scene, but also this battle kept the dynamic of the rebel pilots taking down an Imperial threat in their ships with a much more unique and creative opponent in the form of the AT-AT walkers, which are actually resistant to their blaster fire. And the music is phenomenal here, as is the moment where Luke is almost crushed, but since this is one of the only battles on here where the bad guys technically win, I have to give it some credit for that. At 2 is the Battle of Yavin. While some might argue this battle is too basic to be this high, there's honestly no way I can justify putting it any lower. I mean, this is truly one of the best edited finales to any movie ever, and somehow manages to come off of the incredible Princess Leia Death Star rescue mission section of the movie with something just as good in the form of this trench run, which faces our protagonists against a seemingly impossible task while their base is on the line to be destroyed at any moment. The stakes are high, and it all culminates in a way that is not only perfectly climactic, but also gives Han Solo a way to turn the battle around, which is a nice touch. 1 is the Battle of Coruscant. While some will call it blasphemy for putting it above the Battle of Yavin, everything about this battle is simply incredible. Yes, it does generally focus more on Anakin and Obi-Wan and the path they take to land inside General Grievous's flagship, the Invisible Hand. It does two things that we can never forget about. One, while Geonosis redefined land battles, and from what we'd seen, Naboo teased grander space battles, it wasn't until Coruscant that we finally saw the battle that Endor should have been. The scale is epic, there are so many ships here, and it truly feels like the type of scene George Lucas always wanted to make back in the 70s, and 2, this is one of the best openings to any movie ever, and certainly any Star Wars movie, for how it throws you right into the action and never lets down until they crash land the ship. Also, the pirate ship firing between the cruisers later on in the sequence is pretty dope. But anyway, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you want to. Also consider checking out the merch store, as we've got some really cool stuff over there, like some fire Anakin streetwear and some sweatpants that say Dooku head on it. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll probably understand that reference. For my Christian/life advice of the week, I'm going to go with the Christian side on this one, with the idea that, if you're familiar with the suffering servant, basically it's the idea that sometimes to fulfill God's mission for you or His will, you will have to suffer, you will suffer, and sometimes in life, I think you get to a point where you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be suffering, this thing that I don't want to do, that makes me uncomfortable, that I hate doing, that is causing me suffering, is going to eventually lead to me accomplishing my goals. However, I don't feel like I should be living a life in which I'm suffering all the time, so I'm just going to give up and not do it. Thing is, sometimes you have to suffer for God, you have to suffer for the mission, and just keep that in mind going into the future. But with that said, you can also leave a comment down below if you have any questions about this video or any video suggestions for future videos, whether that be ranked or anything else. I upload normal videos every Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, also shorts every single day, but yeah, see ya.